Hello again. You've probably wondered what to do with those old deck chairs. Well, why not make them into bow ties like Frank Muir?
Good evening, Suzanne. My first guest on this winning team this evening is an actress of all ranges, from the heavy, serious stuff to comedy. It's my teammate next door, Hannah Gordon. My next guest has many strings to his lyre, or to his bluff. He's a columnist on The Guardian. He introduces Today on Radio 4 at dawn, and he also presents Film 74, Barry Norman.
And the Hibernian conjurer himself, Patrick Campbell.
Good evening.
Almost unbelievably, my first guest is neither an actress or a singer or a model. She's a lovely lady journalist called Glenys Roberts. And my other guest has trapped so many spies on Spy Trap that he's bound to see through the foolish Frank Muir, Mr. Paul Daneman.
And thus we get the first word, which is sack-a-winky. And you probably recall that Frank Muir and his team are going to define sack-a-winky 3 different ways. 2 of the definitions are false. One of them is true. That's the one that Patrick and company are going to try and pick out. So what about this word, Frank?
This word, Robert...
I should have called you Francis, really.
Sack-a-winky is South American monkey. It has, of course, several features that other lesser South American monkeys don't have. It looks as though it's wearing a white wig, and it gets very irritable if crossed, and chatters. You know. So, if you're in South America and you see up a tree what looks like an irascible miniature barrister, it is very probably a sack-a-winky.
Yes.
I don't think it
might even be Frank Muir for that. It was a horribly realistic imitation. Barry Norman.
Well, sack-a-winky is a drink made in Hawaii. It's an alcoholic drink. It's not made there anymore, actually, because of the Americans, who are very puritanical, discovered that although like absinthe it makes the heart grow fonder, it also makes people very drunk. It's, perhaps this will help Patrick Campbell, it's a bit like the poutine, so it is. It's made from yams, and poutine is made from potatoes, so it's a bit like poutine.
It's called poutine.
Hannah Gordon, your turn.
Sack-a-winky are very special, long stockings worn by Japanese matrons, of very highly born Japanese matrons. They are quite unique. They're usually made of silk, and the special thing is that each toe is separate, rather like gloves for the feet or hand shoes, if you like. It is possible that on special occasions when a Japanese matron is receiving, she would wear rings on each of her sack-a-winky toes.
That's a good idea.
I should think that would be rather overdoing it, but there you are, they probably know best. Japanese long stockings, a monkey, and a kind of a strong drink. It's Patrick Campbell to pick his choice.
Well, sack-a-winky sounds so Japanese that it either could be that or it couldn't be. But it's certainly Japanese.
That's a helpful remark, isn't it?
I think it's a kind of Japanese firecracker, actually, not a one-toed sock. But it certainly isn't an irascible barrister up a tree in South America. That is for sure. And it doesn't sound like this poutine. Poutine, I beg your pardon.
I'm begging your pardon, Your Lordship.
That's all right, go on over that now. We believe it to be an irascible South American monkey that looks like a barrister up a tree.
Well, that was Frank who dared to give that definition, true or bluff. Ha-ha! What about him and the pochine? What's this about irascible? I never
Yes, I
heard
beg
of
your
that.
pardon. Yes, I got
That's all
rather
right. I wonder whether to
overexcited.
I wonder whether to mention it or not.
I correct it next time. I'll use it again.
Keep you in your place
Get it
one way or
right,
another.
yes.
Moosey is the... I should have repeated, shouldn't I, that it is indeed the monkey up a tree. Moosey is the next word. Patrick.
I'm sorry to hear that it's pronounced Mawsey, and it's a south western Irish dialect word. It comes from the old Irish language. It's popular around about Kerry and Connemara and even the Aran Islands.
What is it?
And if you're Mawsey, it means you're afflicted with corns. And if you're afflicted,
how apt.
If you're afflicted with corns, in the agricultural business, if you've got corns, it's hell. But if you take a sheep and skin it, and keep the fur on the back of the sheep, I make a little kind of pair of boots out of it. It's called a Mawsey biwit, and it's very good if you've got corns and you're working in the fields. Thank you.
So, that, and now Paul Daneman, it's your go.
Well, moosey, as you might expect, actually, is a word suggesting the presence of a stag-like creature with antlers, i.e. a moose. It's just as simple as that. And if you were in Canada and you saw two Canadian hunters there peering through the blizzard with a whole herd of mooses.
It must be
Mice? No. Geese. A lot of things coming up behind them. One might say to the other, do you get the feeling it's kind of moosey around here?
It's moosey along the trail.
Glenys Roberts, your turn.
Moosey is a pebble, and it's a Dorset word. It's a particular pebble found on a Dorset beach called Chesil Beach, which is between the villages of Swire and Langton Herring. And this pebble is a luminous pebble. And it has a particular virtue in the old days, perhaps nowadays too, because there's a lot of smugglers go to Swire and Langton Herring. And what the locals do is they pile up all the luminous stones, the mooses, and the smugglers hone in on them and drop their wares. That's a moosey.
Well, then, it's a foot fraught with corns in somewhere in Ireland. It's a luminous pebble, and it's of a moose. Frank.
It can't be a luminous pebble which you pile up. I don't think any pebble is luminous. It wouldn't be for very long. That can't be right. Moosey, moose-like, I don't think is at all possible. So that's out. And it's certainly not corny Irish boots.
You're in trouble.
Oh, yes. So it's a bit of an eeny, meeny, miny, mo here, isn't it?
Well, short of a player.
Yeah. I think it's moose-like. Let's try moose-like. It's a 33.3% guess, isn't it?
Yeah, well, 2 to 1 chance, as you always know.
Flash the card, lad.
Paul, you gave it. True or bluff, was it? Well done.
You can't beat
It really had to
intelligence
be
and
that.
education.
You
can
know,
you?
it could have been something else.
Moose.
Moosey means exactly what it says. 1-1. Get this other word, zinky. Well, I don't know what you make of that. Barry Norman.
Zinky was a word that was... may I have your attention?
Yes, you've got it. Well,
Thank you.
most of it.
Most of it. It was much in use among rough East Enders of London towards the end of last century, and it was used to apply to immigrants from the Balkan states, mostly to people from Latvia who, among other attributes, were very good at clock mending. So that's what a Zinky was, a Latvian clock mender or an immigrant from any Baltic state.
Right, Hannah.
Well, just as kinky is formed from the noun kink,
And moosey is formed
And that was it.
similarly, zinky is formed from the noun zinc, which is a substance which I am told was used to surface French bars, I think. Thus, zinky is pertaining to, suggesting, in any way resembling whatsoever, zinc.
Kinky.
Frank.
Zinky was a toy which a few American children were kept quiet for a few minutes around about the turn of the century. Circle of highly polished black glass on which was coated barium sulfide, and when the child blew on his zinky or hard on his zinky, it produced, albeit briefly, all the colours of the rainbow.
Well, it means of zinc, it means that sort of toy Frank described, or a clock-mending Latvian. So, Paul David.
I can't really... Do all people from Latvia mend clocks, or do all people who mend clocks come from Latvia? I can't quite...
You're being obtuse.
Yes, I am being very obtuse. I can't believe that. On the principle that moosey is about mooses, zinky should be about zinc, but I can't believe that could happen twice in a row. As for the American children with their toys, that sounds very dangerous, isn't it? What if they lick the barium sulfate off and all that? I can't believe they'd let that happen somehow. I have a feeling it might be the Cockney word, the zinky man.
Barry Norman said it was, didn't it? Yeah, true or bluff? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. No. Nothing to do. They must be called something. The clock-mending Latvians were probably called that.
It's rather unfortunate when Paddy knew it was me and Paul wouldn't...
Who indeed did give the true definition.
Oh, no! Not!
You cheat! Oh. You cheat! I really didn't think they'd try that trick twice. You had moosey, and you had zinky. Well, it might well go on, you never know. Venet, Paul Daneman.
Well, venet is an old pharmaceutical compound, and it's made from, among other things, which I won't tell you what they are because I don't know. It's made from grapes and bismuth, and a teaspoonful of venet is said to form a sort of colonic astringent, which I take it to mean the opposite to the other thing, the purgative. Unpleasant, isn't it, really? In other words, a teaspoonful of venet doesn't help anything to go down.
A costive.
Good.
Yes. No bismuth like slow bismuth.
This is degenerating into a discussion. Glenys, your turn.
Well, venet, or venet, as it actually is the French word, you see, and it's a colour. It's the colour, the predominant colour on Frank's bow tie. The sort of, exactly, everybody else can say it. It's a sort of blue-grey colour, or grey-blue, or that sort of colour. And the interesting thing about this colour is that in the Napoleonic time, they had a very clever thing that they used to do. They used to paint all the ships' sails, because they used to have sails in those days, venet. And then when they went and spied on enemy coastlines, nobody could see them coming, because, of course, grey-blue is the same as the sky and the sea.
Venet vidi vici.
You don't need to laugh like that, Patrick. That's disgusting. Your turn.
A venet is a lightweight lady shawl. Get for afternoon wear, and it was either Thackeray or Trollope, and I can't remember truly. I've got a little favour in way of Thackeray. It described me a disorderly tea party. And he once said the dreadful Colonel Dunbar threw a dart at Madame Roper, and alas, it took hold in the filigree of her venet.
So it's a grey blue colour that the French used on their ships. It's a kind of a shawl, and it's a type of a medicine. So, Barry, your go.
Well, frankly, I think they're all lying. I'm the opposite of a purgative, and then a colour, and then we come to the apparently guileless, but in fact infinitely cunning Patrick Campbell.
No.
And his shawl for light... Is it a lightweight shawl or a shawl for lightweight ladies?
It's both.
It's both.
You have a heavyweight shawl for lightweight ladies or lightweight shawl for heavyweight ladies. It's a shawl, isn't it?
He's fencing.
He's fencing. Yes. I think it's Patrick. I'm sure it's Patrick.
He said it was that shawl, didn't he? That
He said it was that
Collop, or
shawl.
was it Thackeray had something to say about true or bluff?
It was only me, not accurate.
Nothing to do with that. Now we'll learn what the true meaning really was. Here it goes. Must have it about you somewhere, one of you.
Lovely.
See? Does indeed venet or venet means that grey-blue colour. 2-2, and we have the word hippen, and it's Hannah Gordon.
Hippen is the word that they use in Dorset or thereabouts for love-struck. A young man who writes love poems to his sweetheart, or a girl who swoons about the house, would be described as hippen. "Our Rosie be hippen again" might frequently be heard in Dorset.
Be she indeed?
Frank, it's now your turn.
A hippen is none other than but a small heap. Now, it could be a heap of stones, mud, gravel, pebbles, sand, grit, a heap of anything commensurate with a family program like this.
Rubbish.
No, not rubbish. Usually placed beside a hill to stop horses' ooze from slipping in frosty weather.
That sounds very sensible. And now it's Barry Norman's go.
Well, if you were in Scotland, and just to prove that Hannah Gordon is not the only one who can do the accents, if you're in Scotland and you heard somebody say, "Oh, Hamish, the baby's hippen needs changing," what it would mean, getting right down to fundamentals and basics, if not indeed to rock bottom, is that the baby's nappy would need changing, because a hippen is the Scottish word for a baby's nappy. It only becomes a nappy when you get over the border, round about Carlisle.
So it means lovelorn, or it means a pile of anything, and it means a nappy. At least it does in Scotland. Glenys Roberts.
Well, I've never been over the border changing nappies, but at a disadvantage here.
They're rather banking on that.
I don't think so, though, really. A little heap, huh? Or a big heap. And the horse's hooves really put me off there. I would have believed it, except for the horse's hooves. And then love-struck, well, despite the lovely Dorset accent, I think it's a heap.
And who spoke of that? Frank Muir. True or bluff? Yeah. No, that was all fibs. Who gave the true definition of the word hippen?
Not.
Yes. It's a word. Hippen's a word for a nappy north of the border. 3-2, and we have tuku, or, well, I don't know how you pronounce it. Glenys Roberts.
Well, tuku. It's another foreign word, and this time it comes from the Solomon Islands.
Go back.
And it is a parliament, in fact. You may not have known that they had a parliament in the Solomon Islands. They have a parliament, and it is the word for a talk-in or a parliament to get together when they solve all their problems in the Solomon Islands. The reason why I know this is that there is a publication called the Church Missionary Gleaner, which, of course, it's everybody's bedside reading. And in the volume for 1886, there's a reference to, I have to read their names here, the Reverend and Mrs. Silito, who was spreading the good word in 1886 by means of the tuku-tuku.
Yeah. Now it is Patrick's turn.
The tuku-tuku is a little animal, and you find it in Patagonia. All over the place in Patagonia. Except, I spent a lot of time burrowing into the ground of Patagonia.
Don't blame it.
Never stops. Except when it does stop, because it can't do it while its mouth is full of Patagonian earth. When it's done its burrowing, and just sitting at the entrance to the burrow, it raises its hairy little nose in the air and gives a plaintive cry. Tuku. 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 Sad.
The lump rises unbidden to the throat. Paul Daneman, what do you say?
Tuku is a locally made delicacy eaten by the tribes who live near Lake Nyassa in Africa. And it's a sort of crispy biscuit-like cake, and it's made from maize flour and, hold on to your hats, flies. Small, green, gauzy-winged flies somewhere between the size of a gnat and a blue bottle. And that is why near Lake Nyassa they say, "Duck you?"
Duck you.
Yes, they would. It's a sort of parliament in the Solomon Islands. It's a little lovable rodent from Patagonia, and it's kind of a cake made of flies and other stuff.
It's called a Garibaldi biscuit.
Well, I thought it was an Eccles cake, actually. There, Hannah Gordon, your turn.
Well, in Scotland it's called a fly cemetery, I remember. So that was Paul, it was a fly cemetery, the crispy biscuit with flies. No, I've got some awfully strange things written down here. I don't think it's
Read
that.
them out loud.
Shall I?
Yeah.
Dear
Well-
mother, how are you? No.
That's just what I've... No. There's something about the church missionary cleaner. No, that wasn't the right. Was it the church missionary cleaner? Oh, I thought it was the cleaner. I'm sorry. In the Solomon Islands. No, whatever it was, I don't think it was the cleaner. And then there was the the animal in Patagonia with his mouth full of patty. Wait a minute. I'm getting...
You're on more or less the right track so
That
far.
was my
I think I'm
tuku-tuku,
slightly
not
deaf.
your tuku-tuku.
Yeah, I think it was that.
It
Yes.
was my tuku-tuku.
Yes,
I pet tuku-tuku.
that's right.
Then there was a cake.
Paddy thinks that animals burrow by eating the earth. And
Yes.
Are you more or less approaching a
I
point?
wonder
Or,
whose turn it is.
Whatever it was, I think Patrick was right.
it was that very fetching Patagonian rodent. True or bluff, Patrick? Tell us the truth.
Tuku-tuku.
Good.
Well done,
You shouldn't have done it so well. You shouldn't have done it, but that's what it means. It's a Patagonian rodent. And the scores, that brought us really to the end, more or less. Well, indeed, precisely. And the score standing at 2-4. I think I'm right in saying Frank Muir's team has won. We shall be recycling more junk from the Oxford English Dictionary next time. Till then, goodbye from Barry Norman, Paul Daneman, Hannah Gordon, Glenys Roberts, Frank Muir, Patrick Campbell, and goodbye. Hello go again. It's called My Bluff with the Irish warlock, Patrick Campbell.
Good evening. And once again, to my aid, becomes an almost indescribably beautiful female journalist called Glenys Roberts. And an almost impossibly handsome spy trapper, I can barely say it. From Spy Trap, I did it that time, Paul Daneman.
Well, some say that it's the bow tie that clips on. I say it's the moustache, but unmistakably it's Frank Muir.
Back for the second house comes my indescribably lovely actress Hannah Gordon. and my describably good journalist and presenter Barry Norman.
Thank you.
Enough of these gentilities. Let's proceed to the matter of the evening, and it begins with this very good-looking word, Moor punky. And as you recall, Patrick Campbell and his team are going to define this first word 3 different ways. 2 of the definitions are false, one's true. That's the one that Frank is going to try and pick out. So what about this word, Patrick?
Of course, it's pronounced more punky.
Don't believe it.
And it's better known as the spotted phalanger of the Moluccas. It used to be, as you well know, in the Dutch East Indies, now lost, unfortunately, to Holland. The more punky, or spotted phalanger, it's got a pouch like a kangaroo, it's nocturnal in habit, and if you didn't know any better, you might think it was an opossum. But the opossum has a prehensile tail, and the more punky hasn't got a prehensile tail. It's got a non-prehensile tail.
Hensile tail?
Non-prehensile.
Hensile?
No, there's no such word, but there is a word. Non-prehensile. Thank you.
I didn't understand any of that.
No. Paul Daneman.
More punky is a substance found inside beehives in wintry conditions. It's a sort of gluey-like compound which is brought up by bees suffering from the cold.
Vomiting.
And well, you could call it that, I suppose, if you had to. In 1925, a well-known American apiarist called Dulles, who I'm sure you've heard of, spent hours in the garden following bees with runny noses and made the astonishing discovery that more punky was not saponified when it was immersed in a potash solution. If that helps you.
I don't understand that either.
No?
Well, it's the sort of verbal equivalent of the 3-card trick. You must have heard it before. Now, Glenys, your turn.
No, more punky is right. More punky. And it is, in fact, an enormous barge, an enormous Indian barge.
Oh, yes.
That goes down the Ganges in times of festivity. And people crowd aboard it, flags waving, banners streaming, and a lot of music playing, courtesy of the sitar. And light refreshments, chapatis and poppadoms and such like, are served aboard a more punky.
Yeah, well, it's this Indian barge, which is produced at times of fresh air and fun. It's what bees produce one way or another, and it's like an opossum. That much I did grab. Frank. Very scientific, all these definitions.
Oh, yes.
Yes, the punky is rather like punkar for this Indian barge with a party and baby sitars and things and people enjoying themselves. I don't think either more is a very Indian word, although punky sounds a bit like a punker. It doesn't sound like an Indian. Or is it? I don't know about you, but I didn't get one word in 8, and there were about 900 each, in either this bee excrescence or this non-anti-prehensile opossum. So which is
Would
it?
you care to have it again?
No.
No. I'll say it's the bee muck.
The big... That was Paul Daneman who gave that definition. He's going to have to tell you now.
I can be no clearer.
True or bluff? All that stuff about bees? Nah. No, very convincing, but it wasn't true. Who gave the true definition of the word Muir punky? Aha.
Ah, was it? That's what comes of trying to...
It is an Indian barge.
That's what comes of trying to answer intelligently, isn't it?
Ah, yes.
Never works.
Yes. Here we get the next one, and it's Smiggins, Frank Muir to define, say.
Smiggins. The Marshalsea Prison. Magwitch. Oliver Twist. Can I have some more Smiggins, sir? Because Smiggins was the old Victorian name for the sort of brothel girl served in prison. Bit of old gristle floating in hot water with a handful of barley to thicken it. Prison gruel. Smiggins.
Thank you, Brantley Williams. Now, Barry Norman, it's your go.
Well, I fear that Patrick may call my bluff immediately, because he will know, as I do, that a Smiggins is a casual worker in the printing trade. It's employed on a freelance basis, like yourself, like your good self.
It's lousy with them, yeah.
Exactly. Well, yes. A casual worker, not employed on a regular basis, and the word apparently comes from smig, which, as you would expect, is spelt S-M-I-G, and it's a printer's slang term for type that is clogged up with ink, or otherwise defaced, or even bent.
Bent?
Bent. Smiggins. Freelance printer.
Right, Hannah Gordon.
A Smiggins is a rundown or flea-ridden hostelry, or a rundown and flea-ridden hostelry. The origin of the word, it comes from a man called Smiggins, who kept this rather unsavoury inn at Petersfield on the old Portsmouth Road, and it was a refuge for unfortunate sailors.
Unfortunate in what way? No, don't tell me.
Or otherwise defaced.
I see. Well, now, it's gruel served in prisons. It's a kind of a doss house for unfortunate sailors, and it's a freelance printer. Patrick?
Well, the unfortunate sailors have got a very long way to walk if they'd come ashore and ploughing up the Portsmouth Road.
Nothing else to do.
Thumb a lift to get into a miserable dump. And all that... Gristle was not served in soup. You got your veg, but no gristle. All this about bent freelance printers.
No, bent type, Patrick, bent type.
I've been in newspapers now for nearly 40 years. I must say I've never been in the foundry as yet. I keep away from that.
You've never met a printer in your life?
In the street outside, or in the local public house, but never much inside. I believe it's something to do with bent type, but not really, of course.
That, by which I understand you to mean the freelance printer of which Barry Norman spoke. True or bluff?
I'm afraid we're not right.
No, it wasn't. Nothing to do with that. Who gave the true definition of this word?
Oh, no!
It's gruel. Is Smiggins. Score stands at 1-1. We have this word todder and Paul Daneman to define it.
Todder was an essential part of the military equipment of a musketeer. It was a small, airtight, watertight box in which he kept his touch powder, which is what he used not for powdering his nose, but for priming his musket. And in the Tower of London, you will find a fine collection of Todders. I don't think they're on display, but they're kept there. And the walls no longer echo to the sound of the Sergeant-at-Arms saying, "Come here, you horrible little musketeer! Show me your Todder. It's a filthy Todder." The word is passed out of use now in the army.
I should think so.
Yeah.
Not a moment too soon.
Glenys.
Todder is, it's as everyone who lives in the country knows, means frog spawn. It's that stuff that children come home in jam jars with, and then it grows into...
Turns into butterflies.
And then it turns into tadpoles, and then it turns into frogs which jump all over the house. And children in the country, in fact, are accustomed to calling everything that looks like frog spawn Todder, such as tapioca pudding. All those things that children eat.
Caviar, I was going to suggest.
Caviar. Todder.
Patrick.
Todder was an old Edwardian, that period, Edwardian Oxford University word for a boat or shell in which the Oxford University college races are rowed on the aces. The races on the ices. It takes place on the ices. You might therefore, in Edwardian times, have heard a chap saying, actually, I'm rowing number 2 for the brazen-nosed Todder. You would also have heard somebody else saying, I heard that Freddie Folger Mannering is stroking Madeline, stroking the Magdalen Todder. And all that.
Damnably near a joke there, Patrick. Yeah. Damnably. It's a gunpowder box. It's a kind of a college boat, and it's frog spawn. Very Norman.
Well, listening to that unmitigated rubbish, it's hard to believe that any one of them has ever spoken a word of truth in their entire lives.
A journalist.
Frog spawn? Tinderboxes? Stroking Madeline?
It's peddling Magdalen home.
It's impossible to believe that Patrick's telling the truth, but I think just for once in his life, he's speaking the truth. It's Patrick's definition.
He said all that stuff about them rowing college boots while their little fingers are crooked from the way he was speaking. True or bluff?
I love it.
No. It has nothing to do with all that rubbish, as you quite aptly called it, Barry. But who gave the true definition? Equally rubbish, no doubt, but true.
It is frog spawn. Oh, that
See? Yes, frog spawn.
Can't be frog spawn.
That's better
I demand a recount.
No, Todder means frog spawn and ever shall. Dull Willie is our next word, and Barry Norman, you ought to define it.
Dull Willie is actually a provincial... Dull Willie is a provincial name for the ringed plover. It's a country phrase, not generally known, and people in the country call it a dull Willie. Now, what you must never do is confuse the ringed plover with the lesser ringed plover, because the ringed plover is known as a dull Willie, but the lesser ringed plover is known even to countrymen as the lesser ringed plover. Not a lesser ringed dull Willie. Dull Willie is a ringed plover.
Next, please.
Hannah, your turn.
Well, a dull Willie is a boy who resets up skittles in a skittle alley. He's not a very bright boy. He might turn out to be the village idiot quite easily. The derivations are very simple. The origin is that it's an adjective, dull, which you all know, and the Christian name Willie. So, dull Willie.
Logical, but is it true, Frank?
Oh, dull Willie is a kind of... It's difficult to explain. It's kind of... it's a kind of stiffish cambric. Does that make any kind of sense at all? A stiffy cambric, much used for stiffening collars and things, or cuffs. And it comes from the Mysore district of India.
Yes.
I see.
Well, it's a.
Shall
He's done, has he? Well, it's the ringed plover. It's a young lad who puts up the skittles again, and it's a species of cambric. Paul, your turn.
Dalwilly? Seems unlikely to be as simple as that it should be just Dalwilly. Poor little fellow. Standing up there with all those skittles being knocked down. Cambric from Mysore? Why Dalwilly? I mean, I was expecting some brilliant explanation from you, Frank. Nothing came forth. You just told me the facts. The plover seems extremely likely, I must say.
Not the little ringed plover.
Not the little, no, the plover. But I still think that it's probably the chap with the skittles.
That was.
Because it's so simple.
You're going to have that, are you? All right. Hannah, true or bluff? Own up.
Failed. Failed.
Nothing to do with Dalwilly setting up the skittles. Who gave the true definition? Lo, where it comes.
Not all that.
Yeah, yeah.
But not the little ringed plover.
It's the ringed plover, though. It's the ringed plover, and that's 2-all. Tunga, we have. Glenys Roberts.
Yes, tunga is a Malay word, and it's a word for a beater. And these beaters in Malay go out beating for tiger. They beat the bush and the tiger come out. And the thing is that what your Malay native is liable to do when he beats the bush for tiger is he takes his wife with him. And while he's beating, he sends the wife ahead.
That's a good idea.
So that, well, for obvious reasons.
Go get me a tiger,
Tunga.
they say.
Yes.
Yeah, right, all right. Well, now, Patrick, you'll have to tell us what you say.
A tunga, of course, appears in a radio or a television set. But to simplify the matter for you, and God knows this is going to be simple, it better be. A tunga consists of a hot cathode, which is made of wire, and a cold anode, which is made of metal plate. And they're jammed together inside the bulb. And the bulb, of course, is filled with some such inert gas as ergon all around the tunga. Thank you.
You wouldn't like to give us the principle of the internal combustion engine while you're on the
Yes.
No, thanks. Another time, perhaps. Paul.
Tunga is a red wine, colour of arterial blood. It's made in Moldavia, which is the northeast corner of Romania, and it's traditionally served in leather bottles rather than glass bottles, presumably because it melts the glass or something. It certainly keeps all the Moldavian peasants permanently in a breathalyzable condition.
Splendid. Well, it's a kind of a beater. It is a valve in a television set, and it's a sort of wine. Hannah Gordon.
Oh, now then, a Malay beater who sends his wife on ahead to catch the tigers. That sounds possible. It's got a sort of likely sound to it. However, I'll leave that one for the moment to pass on to the cathodes and the anodes and the hot gases, whatever it was. I don't know anything about the inside of a television set.
The hot gases came from Paddy, of course.
What? Don't take any notice of that.
Me.
Oh, you? Yeah. Oh, sorry. And then, Paul, it was the Romanian peasant's red wine. I think it's the Malay beater.
That
After
was
all
what
that.
Glenys Roberts says it was. Draw a bluff, Glenys. No. I wonder which one it's going to be. I wonder if you wonder too.
If you fasten your cold anode onto your hot cathode, you'll find you've got a Let's see if it's on the radio. Yeah, lovely. Great stuff. That's better.
Yes, it's a valve inside a television set. And the score standing at 3-2, we come to Danta. Hannah, it's your turn to define.
Yes, well, Danta, the Oxford Dictionary is rather terse about this, but all it has to say about a Danta, and here I quote, is that it is the female superintendent of a silk-throwing department. However, what? Silk throwing.
They're hurling silk around.
I think so, yes.
Don't answer his questions.
No, I shan't. I don't know. Why this ominous-sounding lady chooses to throw silk around, or rather to supervise throwing silk around in her department, I don't know. And no more information is given on the subject.
Oh, that's lucky, isn't it?
Yes. Well, now, Frank, your definition, if you please.
A danta is in Scottish. It's very, very boring, incidentally. Both the definition and the way I do it. But a danta is in Scottish law what in English law is called a clog on the equity of redemption. You see what I mean about being dull?
Yeah.
But what it means roughly in to the laity is that it's a clause put in which means that a mortgager can't reclaim his property once the debt is paid off, which is not acceptable and is void in law. Danta. A danta.
It's as bad as the inside of that television set he was talking about. Anyway.
No.
Barry, your turn.
A danta, or a dantist, or even a dantophilist, is quite simply an admirer of Dante, the 13th century Italian poet. And all these three adjectives were given to Dante fanciers in Victorian times. When said Dante fanciers used to sit around the fire wearing knickerbockers and Norfolk jackets and read bits of Dante to each other. It was very popular in Victorian times, being a danter, dantist, or dantophilist. Dante fancier.
Right. Well, you have, it's a silk. A lady who throws silk in a silk factory. Someone's got to do it. It's a lover of Dante, and it's a Scots legal term. Glenys.
I didn't understand a word of Hannah's explanation, or Frank's for that matter.
Least of
What
all,
is
Frank's.
a clog on the equity of redemption?
Don't answer. Don't
I, A is the
Don't answer
G.
that.
Thank you. Thanks.
And why one would want to throw silk around? And the other one is a dentist.
I was at least lucid.
A dentist.
Dantophilist.
I think that it's the lady who chucks the silk around.
The lady who chucks the silk around. Hannah, you said it was, didn't you? Was that true, or was it a bluff? Really is a most peculiar thing, but this word does mean a lady who chucks silk about, and no one knows quite why. I dare say nobody cares quite why either, but it's true. Anyway, we've come to the end, and there the score stands. You see it before you, standing at 4-2. Let me just check which side it's on. Yes. Patrick Campbell's team has won. He was frightened for a minute.
Thank you very much. That's better.
We shall have some more non-returnable words from the Oxford English Dictionary. May I remind you, it is the Oxford English Dictionary, no other dictionary, so don't look in other dictionaries and think that because you can't find it, it's not true. It's the Oxford English Dictionary. Till then, goodbye from Paul Daneman, Larry Norman, Glenys Roberts, Hannah Gordon, Patrick Campbell,
Good night.
Frank Muir, and goodbye. Hello, this is Call My Bluff, the Bond Street version of Crown and Anchor, featuring Frank Muir.
Well done. Brilliant. My first guest is an actress, but I must add a male chauvinist guinea pig remark. And so, she's also very feminine and very beautiful and a lovely actress, and it's Gayle Hunnicutt. And as a change, my next guest is economics editor of the Times, but he's also a multi-award-winning presenter of London Weekend's Weekend World, Peter J. Good evening.
And the man from the land of the little people, Patrick Campbell.
Good evening. On the programme nationwide, you have often seen the lovely features of my first guest talking to you through a kind of porthole from the city of Norwich. And here is the whole of the upper half of our Suzanne Hall. And my other guest was an absolute beast of a Nazi Gauleiter in the Colditz story, but here he is his own genial self, Mr. Antony Valentine.
I think we should begin, don't you? I'll ring the bell, and we have the first word, censure. Censure. You pronounce it all different ways, I don't doubt. Frank Muir and his team are going to define this word 3 different ways. 2 are false, 2 are the definitions, 1 is true. That's the one that Patrick and company are going to try and pick out. So what about this word, Frank?
Censure is a thick hedge. It's not an unintelligent hedge. It's a dense hedge. That doesn't help much, does it? It's thick and almost impenetrable, and a particular sort of hedge which has got brambles and bits sticking out of it. So it's terribly difficult to get your way through. You may recall Mr. Chaucer, an earlyish poet, writing in the Parliament of Fools, "Gallant was he as goldfinch in his censure."
Is that a goldfish in a hedge?
No.
No, you're trying to confuse everyone.
A slip of the tongue, Mr. Robinson.
Beg your pardon, Mr. Muir. Shall we proceed? Peter.
Censure. Well, censure means very much what you would expect it to mean, especially if you're a seafaring type. It is, of course, an iron lodging knee that is fitted with a webbed brace. And in case you wonder what it actually does, it's frightfully important in ships because it eases the strain on the bolts which hold the deck planking to the ribs in a ship when it's rolling. If, of course, you're seasick at the time, you may not notice this important function, but it's frightfully important because otherwise the ship might break up and you might then be drowned.
Right, so that's what it means according to you. Now, Gayle Hunnicutt.
Well, thanks to Frank's very flattering male chauvinist guinea pig introduction, I'm very pleased to tell you that censure is, in fact, a diaphanous, very feminine, very wispy fabric, which is used in making bridal veils, butterfly nets, and, in fact, tea bags. It is, of course... It is, of course, a Chinese word, which the English have mispronounced and misspelled. It's actually xian shor, which, of course, as you know, is Chinese for gauze thread. Of course.
So that's what they said. It's a ship, kind of a bracket on a ship holding the ship together, kind of a fabric, and a hedge often crammed to the rafters with goldfish. Patrick.
Finch. That's what I heard, too.
I think it did mean Finch, yes.
Jotting here is goldfish in unintelligent hedge. Now, that's a great help. Well, it certainly isn't anything to do with the ship. That awful jangled nonsense about iron bars holding ships' bolts together. It isn't that, and it isn't a goldfish in an unintelligent hedge, I don't think. I believe it's a kind of... No, I don't. I think it's a goldfish in an unintelligent hedge.
I wonder if you were chosen right. That was what you said, Frank, wasn't it? You didn't mean it, perhaps, but maybe you did. True or bluff?
Well, if you get it right...
One on a technical knockout there, didn't he? Yes. But who gave the true definition of the word? Need to know that.
course, it had
There. It's this delightful fabric that Patrick nearly chose, but not quite. Tubbo's the next word, and it's Patrick's go.
It's an unattractive blemish on the skin of a sufferer from a terrible tropical disease called the yaws, Y-A-W-S. And the chief symptoms are blotches all over the face. You get hundreds of them, and each of them looks like a freshly picked raspberry. That's a tubbo. Each freshly picked raspberry is called a tubbo. All over everything.
Nothing like a good disease for getting a laugh on this show, that's what I say. Antony Valentine, your turn.
Tubbo, in the language of an Australian sheep shearer, is the last sheep of a flock of sheep to be sheared. And apparently there is a superstition amongst Australian sheep shearers that to shear the last sheep, all right, is unlucky. Therefore, the avoidance of this practice is known as dodging the tubbo.
All righty. Suzanne Hall, you'll go.
I just wonder if the sheep have that peculiar raspberry complaint. I was beginning to wonder whether I was coming out in the yaws. No, a tubbo is a sort of mini iceberg. In fact, it's really still joined to the iceberg, but underneath the water, so that a mariner coming along could be under the impression that there was plenty of room for him to get between iceberg and the tubbo, and should he try, there will be a very nasty crunch and a titanic disaster.
Ooh. Oh. Well, it's a very unpleasant blemish indeed. It's part of an iceberg, and it's the last sheep to be shorn by a superstitious Australian. Frank?
Part of iceberg, part of the 9/10 you don't see.
I didn't say anything about 9/10, but you can't actually see it. You can't see the join.
Or the last, I don't think it could be Australian, because they don't normally add an E on the end of things like smoko, which means a small break for light refreshment, and a smoko is just the O. I think you add an E on the end of it. But as for Patrick's face coming out in 100 ripe raspberry, sooner yours than mine, I think it's, without question, Patrick.
Ah, Patrick spoke, didn't he, about all that stuff. True or bluff, Patrick? Don't want to harp on it, but tubbo is all that he said it was, that kind of disease, the blemish of the disease. Bombers, the next word. Peter J.
Well, gentlemen, in the naughty 90s, young gentlemen at the more ancient universities in this country were very keen on bombers. It is, of course, slang for a bonfire. And in case you don't believe me, you can actually look it up in your bedside reading, and a copy of the Oxford magazine for May of 1898, where you will read the following doggerel. While the bonner burns, make haste to pass, the revellers fireworks scattered on the grass.
Someone must have made that up, mustn't they? Gayle, your turn.
Well, I have another feminine definition. Mine is a bonner is the jovial wife of an equally jovial innkeeper. The name for the smiling spouse of the usual apple-cheeked jolly publican, a type of lady still occasionally seen but more often replaced by a rather beady barmaid who simply shouts out, "Time, gentlemen, please, all out."
You're dwelling in the past, my dear. Frank, it's your turn.
Have you ever considered the problem of running a windmill? Because it is absolutely vital to running a windmill that the sails
I thought so.
point towards the wind. Because if the wind veered round the back, you then suck up all the flour and sort of reconstitute it into wheat. You see. It is vital to the process of flour making that it goes the right way. So what do? You see, you have a bonner, which is a kind of I suppose you might call it a sail, a bit of sort of canvassy thing wrapped around a thing which fits on the back of the windmill and acts rather like a weathercock and points the sails into wind.
Lovely. Lovely. Well, it's a slang term for a bonfire. It's a jolly innkeeper's wife, or an innkeeper's jolly wife, and it's a windmill sail. Antony Valentine, your choice.
I've never heard anything so Heath Robinson as sails and sucking up flour and spewing it out. Yes. I'm even more reluctant, actually, with this a jolly good bonner and revellers and fireworks in the grass. 19th century? And only fireworks in the grass? An innkeeper's wife. That seems unlikely, too, that anyone should refer to an... No, I've got to come back to the Heath Robinson. I think it is a sail at the back of a windmill for keeping it pointing in the right direction.
Might give him the chance to do it again if we're lucky. Frank, true or bluff?
But it's not.
No, nothing to do with the windmill. We need to know who gave the true definition. It's there somewhere. I know it is. There, do you see? Old-fashioned undergraduate term for a bonfire. And now we have the word kilch, and it's, Antony, it's your turn.
A kilch is a wooden milking pail used in the west of Scotland and in the Hebrides. The description given in the dictionary would seem to suggest that in England that we would simply refer to it as an ordinary wooden milking pail, but in the west of Scotland and the Hebrides they refer to it as a kilch, a fact which we have to accept.
Yep. Suzanne?
A kilch is a fish, and it's only found on the shores of Lake Constance in Switzerland. Now, it's a great delicacy around the shores of Lake Constance, and people eat it. They find it quite delicious, and it tastes rather like trout, but the only thing is it's a bit... you do get an awful lot of sort of bones, which rather puts some people off buying it a lot.
Trout.
Probably.
Patrick, your go.
Kilch is a kind of graphite which is mined around Otterbourne in Northumberland. It isn't your average black graphite, it's more steely grey in colour, with the result that it cannot be used for making the lead in lead pencils or for shoe polish. Consequently, the wise miners of Kilch, they added to lubricating oils to make the oils lubricate more quickly and smoothly and easily.
Well, you've got to do something with it, that's true. It's Cumberland graphite. It's a milking pail, and it's a sort of fish that you find on the in the Lake of Constance, yes. Peter?
Well, I shall proceed on the basis of Sherlock Holmes, because he's a jolly good detective, and he said that when you've eliminated everything else, whatever remains must be the truth. The trouble is that I've eliminated all three. But I think two are slightly more improbable than the third. I'm dubious about this wooden milking pail in the west coast of Scotland and the Hebrides. It sounds too much like kilt to me to be another Scottish word. And I'm also very sceptical about this graphite in Otterbourne. I thought Otterbourne was in Hampshire, not in Northumberland. Of course, maybe two.
It's Northumberland.
Maybe two Otterbournes, but the one I know is in Hampshire. So I think, improbable though it may be, that there should be something between a kipper and a trout on the shores of Lake Constance, and on the principle of never disbelieving a lady, I'll go for the fish.
Well thought out, well reasoned. Suzanne Hall, true or bluff?
Alas, alas.
A bullseye. It's the fish. It's the fish. Indeed, it's the fish. 4-0, my goodness me. My goodness me. Anderoon is the next word, and it's Gayle Hunnicutt's turn.
I have yet another feminine definition. This time, my feminine definition is about an anderoon, which is a place in which I'm very sorry to say most of you gentlemen would never be found, because it is the anteroom of the Persian harem, or the private chamber, where the ladies wait of the Shah's menage, whiling their time away playing ping-pong and embroidering. They wait there until the Shah has the envious pleasure of inviting them to his company.
Splendid, nice girls, all of them. Frank, it's your turn.
Anderoan. Anderoan, tin, finger, ointment. Unguent, perhaps. It's an elderly kind of ointment, chief ingredient of which is cobwebs. It was known to the Phoenicians and was meant to stop bleeding.
Yeah, yes, very good. Excellent. And now we have Peter J. It's your turn.
Anderoon, a sacred baboon, worshipped by the Ubishara, a strange sect of tree dwellers in Nepal. They worship it because it has the exceptional property, which has hitherto defeated human scientists, of managing to be in 2 or even 3 places at the same time.
So there you have it. It's a mad monkey, if I've got it right. It's sort of an ointment, and it's a very respectable part of a harem, where they fill in time, as it were. Suzanne.
Well, I'm flummoxed. The sacred baboon, which is so elusive it can't be found, I think perhaps we could leave that an elusive away. I can't believe that. Now then, the Persian room for the ladies of the harem, I didn't know that the Shah of Persia had a harem. I thought that he was very faithful to his wife. And I didn't know that the ladies of Persian harem would play ping pong, did you?
Never.
No. So I think I must go for the ointment which perhaps could be anointed on the sufferers of Patrick's raspberry blemishes, and I think, Frank, it is yours.
It is indeed. Frank, own up, saucebox.
It's another bluff, isn't it?
I wonder if this is going to be... Is it a white... I never get the right word. Whitewash?
whitewash.
Yeah, I wonder. Who knows? Let's have the true definition.
Ping pong wins the day.
So, that goodness, well, there you are. 5-0 at the moment. Calendar is the next word. Suzanne Hall, define
yes.
it.
Yes, indeed. A calendar is a wooden pin which is used for fastening stob thatch. Now, stob thatch is quite different to ordinary sort of Norfolk reed thatching because it's a mixture of clay and thatch. You'll probably all know, you're familiar with stob thatching. Now, it was so named after its inventor, who was a very splendid gentleman called Benjamin Calendar, and the information comes from his gravestone. It's inscribed on it, as well as the words R.I.P., in Axminster, Devon.
Patrick, yes.
The calendar is a Mediterranean skylark. It flies about all over the air of the Mediterranean, sometimes touching upon North Africa, sometimes even coming as far as the Côte d'Azur. But it's much bigger and plumper than the English skylark. It's got quite a chest on it. Of course, not the size of a turkey, you understand. And it's the great size of its chest, comparatively speaking, that gives the skylark, this kind of skylark, the calendar, its almost baritone voice. What's the...
I was just thanking my lucky stars that you weren't Frank Muir, otherwise you would certainly have sung it or done something, yes, you know, like that. But, Antony, it's your turn.
A calendar is a slope in a horse's training area, training ground, down which the animal is ridden at speed, not excessively, in order to bring it on to the bit. Undoubtedly, Her Royal Highness would know why it had to be brought onto the bit. Alas, I don't. But if you have one that needs bringing on, then you need one of these, a calendar.
Well, it's a slope. It's a slope that you run horses down. It's a big fat skylark in the Mediterranean, and it's a thatching pin. Gayle Hunnicutt.
Well, now, being American, I don't know a great deal about thatching. I'm going to leave that for a minute. It was a very convincing definition. Therefore, I'm I'm a bit worried. It was a bit too convincing. I didn't quite understand. I mean, it sounded so feminine, this chesty bird, and then it had this baritone voice. I was rather thrown by that. And I don't know. I somehow found that it quite well might be a slope in the ground. and that Her Royal Highness just might know what to do with it. So I'm going to vote for that.
You vote for that. You vote for Antony Valentine. That's true or bluff? They've broken their duck. Nothing whatever to do with the slope for horses. Who gave the true definition?
Tweet, tweet. Tweet, tweet.
It's just what he says. It's that Skylark 5-1. I would have been very sad if you hadn't broken your duck there. Salta or salta, Frank?
It's a kind of Portuguese offensive weapon. It's a kind of sandbag. You know those sandbags shaped rather like a good garlic sausage? Not one of those that soldiers crouch behind, you know, or they put up to stop the Thames overflowing into Europe. It's a thing you slug, and it used to be made from eel skins.
Yes. Peter J.
Well, if Sarah Bernhardt was on the panel on the other side, she'd know what it was, because she used to play it. In fact, she was rather good at it. It is a sort of jumbo halma, only instead of having 64 squares on the board, you have 100 squares on the board. And it's a fairly new game. It's been played most of this century. Indeed, in 1901, the first, I think, international Salta tournament was played.
Seems feasible. Gayle?
Well, I'm rather sad that Frank isn't giving this definition because it's something he probably would exhibit for you. I will not. It is a
already.
It is a Neapolitan dance of a very sprightly nature which calls for extravagant skips and jumps by couples taking part, although it is of Spanish origin, although it's a Neapolitan dance, having been introduced to Naples in the 16th century when it was being governed by the Spanish viceroys.
You're quite right, he would have done, Gayle.
I know,
He would have
I know.
done. Well, it's a Neapolitan dance, Frank Muir didn't do. It's a loaded sandbag, and it's a kind of big game of halma. And it's Patrick's turn.
It seems to be so odd to have a sandbag covered with eel skin. It's not all that tough, is it, an eel skin? Because a big, tough eel skin.
I think I'll have to hurry you along.
It's the right shape. Well, yeah, I beg your pardon, yes, I was thinking to myself pretty well. It isn't a dance, it's a halma. A kind of superior large game of halma.
Peter, you said that. True or bluff, was it? The bullseye. So there you are. That just right in the nick of time you scored another point because this word does indeed mean the sort of halma he described. So the score standing at 5-2. Nonetheless, Frank Muir's team has won. Well, I'm sure we all hope that next week we'll be shaking out some more technical hitches from the Oxford English Dictionary. And until then, goodbye from Peter J. Goodbye. Antony Valentine. Gayle Hunnicutt. Suzanne Hall. Frank Muir.
No.
Patrick Campbell.
No.
And goodbye. Well, this is called My Bluff, as you well know, where if the word isn't a disease of sheep or a technical hitch, it's a Turkish bath attendant or even Patrick Campbell.
Good evening. And my first guess is that lovely, talking, laughing lady reporter from Nationwide, Suzanne Hall. And my other one is still on the run from Colditz, Mr. Antony Valentine.
And the man in the ad-height shoes, Frank Muir.
Good evening, and I return with my victorious team of last week. The splendid actress, the lovely Gayle Hunnicutt. And the economics editor and presenter of BBC of television current affairs programmes, Peter J.
You may have thought that all that went before was the game. It isn't. This is it. Starts now, I can assure you, with this word, Mormaluki, I suppose, something like that. Well, Patrick Campbell and his team will define this word 3 different ways. 2 definitions are false, 1 is true. That's the one that Frank and Co. will be looking out for. Patrick, what about this word?
Mormaluki is a kind of grey-green moss that grows in North America, mostly round about the New England area. The provident people of New England occasionally dry the Mormaluki, and stuff it into mattresses and pillows.
Where else?
That's what they do with their Mormaluki.
Antony Valentine.
Mormaluki is to a disciple of Confucius roughly what the Common Book of Prayer is to a Protestant. It's a book listing religious exercises that should be performed. It also contains a section known as the Analects of Confucians, which deals with some of his dialogues and aphorisms.
Right, now, Suzanne Hall, it's your turn.
Mormaluki was the most dreaded word to 17th century parents of small children because Mormaluki were a sort of small hobgoblin which used to petrify 17th century toddlers. Their hair used to stand on end, they'd be ashen-faced, screaming. And if a parent heard that there was a Mormaluki in the nursery, all hell let loose.
OK, well, it's a religious book. It's a sort of moss, complicated sort of moss, and a kind of a hobgoblin. Frank, you choose.
Well, what it isn't, if I may so start, is things that the North Americans stuff up pillows. Dried moss. It is not. No. Is it? Well, I think not, anyway. Whether it's this Confucius' prayer book or whether it's the Hobgoblin, I'm not really certain. No, it must be the Hobgoblin.
Oh, Suzanne, wasn't it you?
On.
Yes, it was. You
Flash
said
it.
Was that true? Wow. Mormaluki is a hobgoblin, just like you said. 1-0. Schlitch, I don't know. Frank.
Well, a schlitch is an old East End of Londoners' word for... Go on, write it down. For a knife grinder's assistant. You see, he was the lad who went round the houses gleaning the knives and forks to rush back to his boss, who was on this sort of upturned tricycle, pedalling away, grinding the knives. Nothing more to add to that, really.
All it needs is a steel engraving, really, doesn't it? Peter J.
Well, if someone were to deliver a load of old dirt into your front garden and to tell you that it was half full of precious metal, you probably wouldn't believe him. But if you did believe him, what you would need is to get somebody else to deliver you another load just as big of quicklime. And then you mix the two together and you pour on water. The act of pouring on the water raises the temperature, separates out the precious metal from the dross. And the mixture that you have in the middle of this process, this dreary mixture, is slitch.
Gayle Hunnicutt.
Well, slitch is actually an American word. It's a word used, a slang word, used, and it's applied to the game of baseball, actually. It's something that occurs when a baseball player is on the field and he suddenly suffers a very severe and very, very painful cramp. In fact, a slitch is the occupational hazard of pitchers.
Right, well, I just scarcely wrote that down. It's a baseballer's cramp. It's a mixture of gold and quicklime, and it's a knife grinder's assistant. Patrick.
Look at their eyes. That's the secret.
I can't imagine anyone coming up to my garden with a load of dirt and tipping it over the hedge without some kind of protest from my good self.
You'd miss out on the
And
gold.
if he arrives a second later with a load of quicklime and throws that over as well, and then with a bucket of water, I'm left with slits which I can't even say. That's utter nonsense. It's too far-fetched for words, is it? The knife grinder's assistant, and they don't need assistants. They do all their own knife grinding and fetching and carrying, and I think you said garnering. I think it must be. I wonder what Gayle was talking about. This pitcher slitch.
Tennis elbow played in America.
I think it's a knife grinder's assistant.
I thought
You do.
I
That
thought you were.
What, Frank? Own up, lad. True or bluff?
But it isn't, is it? Take it back.
No, it isn't that. Who gave the true definition? Tell us, please. There's Peter J.
No.
They are not. Well, no one's going to clap a mixture of gold and quicklime, I'd say, but still, there you are. That's what it is, a mixture of gold and quicklime, and you evidently need it to sort the gold out, I think. Lobbit is the next word. Antony Valentine.
A lobbit in the brewing of fermented liquors is a sign that all is not as it should be. It is one of a number of opaque scales that float to the surface whilst it's fermenting, indicating very sadly to the brewer that his yeast is infected.
Right. Suzanne, you must tell us now.
Well, a lobbit is a special sort of knot that's tied on the end of a rope to stop it going through a ring. You see, it had suddenly hit the knot, and so therefore it couldn't go any further. And the difference between a lobbit and just an ordinary knot is that this knot is bigger than the ring, therefore it can't pull straight through.
Yes, nice, brief, to the point. Patrick?
A lobbit is a medical term, of course. It's employed nowadays only by nurses who did their studying under Florence Nightingale, the kind of mature nurses. And they use the word lobbit to describe any part of the liver. Now, the odd thing is that the human liver only has two lobbits. It's got a left lobbit and a right lobbit.
Thank God.
But a pigeon has four lobbits.
No.
It's got a northern lobbit and a southern lobbit and an eastern lobbit and a western lobbit. That's what a pigeon has.
That's why the Romans used them to decide whether they're going to win the war or not.
Just get on with the game quietly.
It's a knot in a piece of rope. It's scales forming on the top of fermented liquor, and it's a bad sign. And it's part of the liver. Part of the liver. Peter J.
Well, I don't think Sherlock Holmes is going to be any help to me at all here, despite his excellent advice to eliminate the improbable, and whatever you're left with is the truth. I'm really very puzzled indeed. Muck in booze. I don't think that it's going to be muck in booze. I can't see such stuff being dignified with a special name in the dictionary. It doesn't sound very likely. I'm frightfully keen to believe Suzanne, because I always believe ladies, but I know about ropes. I spend a lot of my time mucking about with ropes, and lobbits is not one of the terms that I ever heard or ever encountered in the seaman's manual. So one's left with this wildly improbable notion of it's what makes a pigeon livered. And I find that very hard to believe, but following Sherlock Holmes, I will stick to the principle, and having eliminated the other two, that's what it must be.
Right, Patrick, own up.
It has to be crooked.
Yep, that lobbit is part of the liver. If you have to refer to it at all, that's what old-fashioned referrers to livers do. Quincess is the next one. Peter J. to define.
Yes, quincess. Well, quincess is a fairly straightforward word which players of the game of piquet will frequently use. It's very well known that if you have a 5-card sequence from the ace down to the 10, that's called a quint. What isn't quite so well known, except amongst people who really play the game a great deal, is that if you have a sequence of 5 cards from the knave down to the 7, I hope that's 5 cards, then that's called, naturally enough, a quincess. Quincess.
Could be, couldn't it? Yes. Gayle.
Well, quincess is in fact something I hope none of you have ever suffered from, because it is a symptom of a very serious malady called chinkonism. It results in giddiness, and in fact, I think I ought to add that it is caused by taking too much quinine.
Well, let that be a warning. Frank Muir?
Just as a princess is, in a certain sense, the female equivalent of a prince, so a quincess is the female of a quince. To save you the embarrassment of asking me how to tell the difference between a quince and its quincess, the quincess is rounder, fuller, smoother, has a slight golden hue, and is altogether more voluptuous a beast.
So, it's a lady quince. It's a kind of giddiness. It's a term in the card game piquet. Antony.
I'm overwhelmed with this round, voluptuous whatnot. I can't subscribe to that. I want to. I really want to, but I can't. Peter, I find overwhelming. The staggering mathematics have left me totally confused. Gayle, I want to believe anyway. I don't think it can be, though, somehow. It doesn't sound very medical. I'll have to say it's Peter.
Yes, he said it was the term in piquet, that it was a run or a sequence. True or bluff? Oh, no. I wonder what the real definition will be. Get away, get away.
No.
Unbelievable.
Frank, do eat quincess jelly.
If you must.
Yes.
Quincess cheese.
Well, anyway, that's what it means. Quincess is a female variety of quince. Avage, I suppose is the way you pronounce it, Suzanne?
Oh, yes, it's avage. It's a greeting, a friendly salutation. Anybody who comes up with a really welcoming, holding out their hand, really pleased to see you, that is an avage greeting. And equally, somebody who's clearly not pleased to see you or wishes to say farewell, that's known as a valage.
Yes, right. Patrick.
Apogee, it's a quaint old bit of medieval law, really. It's a payment made by the manner of, I better spell it, W-R-I-T-T-E-L, got it? Rittle. I think it's in Essex. Yes, it is in Essex. What? Rittle, you got that down? The people of the manor of this place in Essex used in the old days to pay abaci for the pleasure of feeding their pigs in the woods. They lined up pigs to feed in the woods. But now, no doubt, the woods are completely covered with high-rise buildings, and so no more abaci is demanded from anybody. Thank you.
There was a note of pathos in that. There was indeed. Antony Valentine.
Avage is simply a verb. I avage, thou avagest, he, she avages, etc., etc. Though I should sincerely hope that none of us would be so lacking in table manners as to do this. In fact, it means simply to rend or tear with the fingers a carcass, as indeed Henry VIII was wont to do with his spitted chicken. Avage.
Well, it's a tenant's due of some sort or other. In Essex, I think you've said, Patrick, it's a kind of very merry greeting, and it's a way of tearing up your food. Gayle.
Well, I'm afraid, like Sherlock Holmes down there, I'm absolutely lost. I believe actually all of them, or none of them. French greeting. Well, I grew up speaking Spanish, so I won't be very good on that one. I so enjoyed Patrick's definition, I really did. I'm very sorry there are all those high-rise buildings and we can no longer have this averaging going on. I don't know about Henry VIII. I never heard that he averaged a lot. So I think I'm going to go for Patrick.
Yes, it was a gripping tale he told.
It really was.
Was it true or bluff, Patrick?
I cannot believe it.
Oh. All he said, and I do not propose to add a word to it, was true. 5-0. Well, the next word is Spinger, and it's Gayle Hunnicutt's turn.
Oh, is it? Gosh. Well, a Spinger is something I grew up very much surrounded with because it's a kind of a horse, which we have in Texas. And it's the kind of a horse that, really rather like a woman, will either go very, very fast or it will just dawdle along and do what it pleases. And if you wish to apply this to human beings, you can also use this term to apply to a very temperamental woman, as I've said, or I suppose to a very temperamental man. A Spinger.
Right. Frank.
Spinger. Spinger is an onomatopoeic word. Spinger, you see. And it's a word, an old word for an extra note, a grace note, played on stringed instruments. It's an extra. So, or and there's a 17th century musical book which notices it and said it concludeth the sound of a note more acute.
That's all.
Yes, except wait till he produces the fiddle. Don't say another word. Peter, your go.
The thing to do when there are spingers around is not to bend over. Or well, that used to be the case anyway, because a spinger is in fact schoolboy word, slang I suppose, for a pea shooter. Rather gone out of use nowadays because young men now have death ray guns and radio-controlled ballistic missiles and all that kind of modern stuff. But in the good old days, when I was young, a really active schoolboy necessarily equipped himself before the beginning of term with a spinger and probably a spare one as well.
So then it's said to be an extra or grace note. It's a fairly unreliable horse, and it's a pea shooter. Suzanne.
I'm so confused I almost have to have a sort of tea break to think about it all. Now, the horse, this American horse, which either goes flat out or not at all, in this country would be described as nappy and would be neither good to man nor beast. But you always call it a spinger. I'm a bit dubious about that. Now, the stringed instrument makes this extraordinary noise that shatters glass. Oh, dear me, Frank, I don't know anything about those peculiar noises. The pea shooter sounds plausible. I think it's the horse.
You think it's the horse? And that was Gayle. You said it all. Is it true or bluff? You have to own up now.
Well, I know. Well, in Texas, I can only tell you I've never heard of one.
Not a horse, not a horse. You can't wait to learn what it really is.
Bing!
Oh, no, not.
It's an extra or grace note, and the score is 6-0. I think we've only time for one more.
Thank God.
Let's see what you can do with this. Toggy, Patrick.
A toggy is a thing that happens to a herring. If a herring should wander into the Humboldt warm current, it's liable to turn into a toggy, which is a herring with parasites all along its back.
Oh.
It can also be called the rope sickness.
thought you were going on for a minute.
No, that's enough of the rope sickness.
Yes.
Rope sickness.
Antony Valentine, your turn, huh?
Toggy is a garment designed for wear, an outer garment designed for wear in the Arctic regions. In fact, it is made from undressed beaver skins, which are sewn together and conventionally worn with the furry side next to the skin, which may possibly account for the smile on the face of the Eskimo. He's being tickled by his Toggy.
Suzanne Hall, your turn.
Now, wait for it. A Toggy is a very roughly constructed platform which is erected by coal miners by the side of a railway station. Now, on top, it's very often made out of railway sleepers, in fact. Now, on top of this sort of rough platform, the coal miners light fires. Now, these are not, as you might think, to keep them warm, but they're to light the fact that newly hewn coal is stacked alongside. Thank you.
All right. Nothing glamorous about that. It's a platform. It's a sort of coat worn by the Eskimo, and it's a wormy herring. Frank.
Yes, I don't know. I don't think so. We don't know. I'm worried about the thing. I didn't quite follow. It was most beautifully done. It's entirely my fault. But the coal miners setting fire to themselves on top of platforms.
No, they're not setting fire to themselves. They, after they've put their newly hewn coal by the side of the railway platform, if it's at night, they build this platform.
They set fire to themselves. No, it's not that. I don't believe that you do have Eskimo words in the Oxford Dictionary, particularly not with words like toggle, which sounds like those things that you have on coats. So I think it's Patrick's parasitic herring covered in thingies.
Well, now, to the definition must he add a total defeat we'll never know, or we will in a second, true or bluff?
Not this time.
That was a tremendous relief to everyone, I'm sure. But who gave the true definition of that? Someone must have done. There it is. Oxford English Dictionary is full of Eskimo words, Frank. But anyway, that's what it means. A toggy is a sort of beaver skin coat worn by the Eskimo. Well, there you are. There you have the score. No ambiguity in that. 6-1. Frank Muir's team wins. Well, next week we shall have more words from the OED, words that have gone a bit critical, I suppose. Until then, goodbye from Antony Valentine, Peter J., Suzanne Hall, Gayle Hunnicutt, Patrick Campbell, Frank Muir, and goodbye. This is another session of Call My Bluff. That means another session of thimble rigging, led by Frank Muir.
My first guest is a very beautiful ballet dancer. And more than that, she's a choreographer. And more than that, she's the artistic director of the London Festival Ballet. It's Beryl Gray. My second is a very good actor. I know he's a very good actor because I've acted with him. It was quite recently on a Sunday evening in Manchester at 3069 Company, and we only acted together for about 42 seconds. But he's also quite well known for The Day of the Jackal. It's my fellow actor, Edward Fox.
And the man man with the 8-inch parting, Patrick Campbell.
Good evening. There's no need for me to introduce my first guest. That's why I'm going to introduce her. You love her as much as I do, dear little cuddly Pauline Collins. And my other guest is absolutely dipped in the difficult art of music. He talks about it endlessly, he composes it, he writes it, he lectures about it, he appears on the radio about it. Mr. Antony Hopkins.
Let's see if we can get a word. Here it comes. Ring-a-ding. Sharpshin. Yes, that's the first word. And that word is going to be defined by Frank Muir and his team 3 different ways. 2, as you may recall, are false ones. 1 is true. That's the one that the people on the other side are going to try and pick out. What about Sharpshin then, Frank?
Sharpshin is an American slang word. No. Oh, it is, Paddy, it is. It means a coin of such a small face value that it has virtually no spending value at all. In France, it would be a centime. In America, it's a cent. In England, it's a 50p piece. You know, you just can't do anything with it. And there's an American expression, if you want to say the equivalent of it's not worth a brass farthing, you say, that ain't worth a darn shot.
Edward, your turn.
A sharpshin is it's the smallest and it's the narrowest type of Australian surfboard. It's used on beaches like the Bondi Beach. And it appears really that only very, very highly skilled men can use the sharpshin. And it's curious that it has a turned-up toe, like a Turkish slipper, in the front.
Well, I've got one of those.
You have?
Beryl Gray, now your turn.
Sharpshin is an abrasive powder that's made by grinding the inner shell of a cuttlefish. It used to be used quite a lot, actually. It used to be used, let me see, for a sort of pounce for stopping the ink spreading on unsized paper. And another use that I think quite a lot of us could perhaps go back to today, and that is mixing it with soapy water and using it on your window panes to get rid of all that awful soot and grime that comes out of the exhaust cars onto window panes.
Yes, well, it's a very narrow surfboard used only by the cleverest surfers. It's a very low-value coin, and it's an abrasive powder with 101 uses. Patrick, choose away.
I'd never heard of Sharpshin. They have all kinds of dimes and nickels, but surely... It's too long, anyway. It kind of imitates deep South accent. No. Dribble. You sure? Now, this surfboard that's turned up in front, if it was turned down, you'd never get anywhere at all, would you? However narrow or wide it was.
A pointless remark.
That's what he said. It turned up in front. You get on with it. We believe it fairly firmly to be a kind of abrasive powder.
The abrasive powder of which Beryl Gray spoke. Was that true or bluff?
She's looking very smug. Yes.
It's very nice to be believed. Thank you very much.
It wasn't that abrasive powder. What was it of the other two? Here comes the true definition. Own up now, one of you.
Oh,
Your guess wasn't worth a darn shot.
Unbelievable. The low-value coin is a sharpshin. And now we have yarum, and a dozen different pronunciations, I don't doubt. Patrick.
Yarum, it's a kind of sap that oozes from a tree of the palm tree family. It grows mainly in Central Africa, and the wily natives, after they made little incisions, just like a rubber tree, really, they made a little incision in the tree, and out of it comes lovely lumps of yarum.
Of
a little ball of it, and leave it in the sun until it's almost hard. And then they glue their canoes together with it just as if it was glue.
Antony Hopkins.
The U is virtually silent because the two R's should be pronounced with a Hebridean roll. You should say yarm, yarm, like that. And it's actually a Hebridean islander's garden or small plot of land attached to an islander's croft. And it can be measured in terms of a rig, a one-rig yarm or a two-rig yarm, and so on. A rig being as many potato plants as would normally yield 10 stones of potatoes.
What's your tale, Pauline Collins?
Yarum is a word from thieves' cant. It's a word used by criminals in the underworld, and it means nothing more than milk. So it's very hard to imagine an old lag drinking a glass of milk unless he's a cat burglar.
Very clever, that one. It's Hebridean garden. It's sap from a tree, very useful when pressed together and so on. And it's a thieves' term for milk. Frank?
I tend to think canoe glue new. Hebridean garden with roods of potatoes and
10 stones.
10 stones. There's a lot of potatoes in a small garden, isn't it? I think it must be this milk with a joke attached to it. Thieves' milk.
That was Pauline, yes.
Gross
Were you
definition.
teasing us, I wonder? Now she has to tell us. Bullseye. I've often wondered what the psychology of this is, Frank. I mean, that was the most unlikely one. Was that why you chose it?
No.
Oh.
I hadn't got a thought in my mind, so I went resolutely for Pauline.
The old 2-to-1 chance, yes, and it never fails. But there, how peculiar. Yarum did mean that. It meant milk. Curious. Patris we have next. Edward Fox.
Well, Patris. A Patris is a room that's set apart for the hanging of game. It's a sort of outhouse or a cellar. And it's best sited on the lee side of the prevailing wind. And you hang your game in the outhouse, you see, and His Grace is given due notification of the time that it is decomposed to a sufficient extent to be put on his table.
No house should be without one. Now it's your turn, Beryl.
A patris is that which is fixed between a gas bracket and the wall to which it's actually fixed. It's about 1 inch thick. It's made of wood. It's usually square, 4 inches square. Or if it's circular, it's 4 inches across. And it's generally decorated with either a beveled edge or slightly fluted. In fact, the ones in my grandmother's house were all fluted.
I bet they were.
It's Frank Muir's turn now.
A patris was lady pastry cook. She was a lady with her sleeves rolled up and flour all over her arm, who rolled away with a rolling pin all day, getting the dough to the right thickness and consistency. A patris didn't make joints or roast joints or anything like that. She was totally concerned with making ornamental centre ornaments out of pastry and things for tables. And there was an academy of patrices just off Golden Square.
It's a square of wood between the bracket of the lamp and the wall. It's a sort of game larder, and it's a lady pastry cook. Antony Hopkins.
I think I'm going to reject the lady pastry cook simply on the grounds that the end of the word, being S, does suggest the female sex. And so, therefore, it's a little bit too easy, I think, the lady pastry cook, yes. And I think there was a bit too much acting to add verisimilitude to an otherwise unconvincing tale.
Disagree.
Gas bracket connection to wall, fluted. I knew they'd drag music in somehow. Now, I think I'm going for the least probable, which is the outhouse cellar for hanging the game. Edward Fox, I call your bluff.
Edward Fox, true or bluff? You got it there?
Oh, no.
We need to know now who gave the true definition of this word.
Not all that.
Yes.
I told you I saw them in my grandmother's house.
It's so peculiar that something that doesn't do anything very much should be called anything. But there you are. Stranger things have happened on this programme and may yet.
Question mouth.
What?
You're called the question mouth.
Yes. I'll think about that as I can't pronounce it anyway. Probably called farm or faham. I have no idea. But Antony Hopkins, how do you say it?
Faham.
Uh-huh.
Faham. And I'm very glad to have been given this word, actually, because I've really been looking for it for a long time. People say to me, when I give lectures about music and so on, where do you get all these wonderful ideas? And I say that my theory is that I lie in the bath and look at the ceiling and think of absolutely nothing for a long time, and on the principle that nature abhors a vacuum, I then think that ideas come into my mind. And I've never known the word to express this, but actually faham does this very thing because it's a disciplined negation of thought as practiced by a contemplative Buddhist. And it's a state of mental vacuum, in fact, which a Buddhist strives to achieve in order to be more receptive to the promptings of his soul. So if you ask me what faham means, it means absolutely nothing.
Ah, well, now, Pauline.
Well, a faham is a native tailor in Senegal, which, as you know, is in West Africa. In the 19th century, a lot of Indian immigrants came into Senegal, and tailoring was their main trade. And in the dialect of Africa, fahami means strangers or unwanted people. And gradually this came to mean tailor because all these Indians were tailoring. Faham.
Yes. Now, Patrick, let's have you.
I know, Frank, that you've just come back from the tropical island of Mauritius and that your lovely wife Polly was born there. So therefore, both you and Polly and the rest of the audience must know that faham is a Mauritian orchid. But it's a kind of edible, well, not an edible orchid, but if you peel the leaves off it after it's flowered, and kind of grind them up a little bit, you make the most delicious tea.
Well, it's a Senegalese tailor, is what it is. It's a state of mental vacuum, emptiness, nothing. And it's an orchid you can eat, should you wish to. Edward Fox.
Well, it's a mental vacuum that Mr. Hopkins uses quite a lot.
In the bath?
In the bath. I don't know, it doesn't really fill me with confidence, that mental vacuum. It took a bit too long to spell out, I thought it had to be. I thought the lady protested a little too much with it. I think the orchids, it's a bit expensive, really, I'd have thought. Orchid tea. I can't really see that happening on the island of Mauritius. It sounds to me like a tailor, a native tailor.
Native of Senegal, in fact, yes. Pauline, you said it all, didn't you? True or bluff? She only said it because it did sound like a tailor, but it wasn't true, was it? Who gave the true definition?
You don't know me.
You have it there, I'm
You're
sure.
Mauritius from your elbow.
Edible orchid from Mauritius, that's what it is. Well, now you have choker, I don't know, Beryl Gray.
Yes, choker. This, Antony Hopkins will know, is a long brass horn that's played, or rather blown, regularly. Makes the most ghastly noise, as you know. and it's blown usually at funerals, Bolivian funerals, this is. They use it in Bolivia also to make this horrible sound when the troops are charging into battle. And I think that it was last used in 1842, I hope I've got my dates right, at the Battle of, I can hardly say this, Ayacucho. A lot of you must know where that is or when that was, 1842. And this was, in fact, when the Bolivians managed to decimate the Paraguayans. So it's this extraordinarily ugly horn.
Yes, now, Frank, define.
Chuka. Trot into your library, Patrick. Take down your old copy of the Quran, and you'll find it there. You'll also find it on coins of the Abbasid dynasty, and possibly on contemporary sort of monuments of the 7th century A.D. It's a form of, said he ploughing on, it's a form of Arabic writing, which is more angular than normal, and it does not have, and I can't add anything more to this next sentence, so you just have to take it as it is. It does not have breathing marks.
What's a breathing mark?
He mustn't tell you. Edward Fox.
Shocker. It's sort of non-alcoholic cocktail. It's a mixture of 50% chocolate and 50% coffee, and sort of mud-coloured beverage that was a great favourite of Voltaire, who would quaff shocker in large quantities when he was discoursing at the Café Procop.
Well done at the last moment.
Took that fence like a man, didn't he? I admire that. It's a brass horn blown at Bolivian funerals. It's a healthful drink, a mixture of coffee and chocolate. We've all been waiting for it. And it's a species of Arabic writing. Pauline.
Well, now, the species of Arabic writing, the formation of the word somehow seems too modern to provide the root for any form of script at all. I'm sorry, Frank, to disappoint you.
Oh.
Choca as a drink is tremendously appealing, but that sounds a little bit too set up, as if you'd thought it out. I mean, a drink, a mixture of chocolate and coffee would sound rather like that, I suppose. I'm not sure that coffee was on the market at the time of Voltaire, but perhaps I'm wrong there, and probably am. I very much liked Beryl's History of the Horn. Also, a choca sounds so much like all the other instruments in Latin America, like malaca and caraca and anything else that Antony cares to name. So therefore, I think it's a horn.
Should love to see someone playing the malacas, I really would. But, now, you did say that, Beryl, didn't you? Was that true, or was it just an
I
come on?
regret to tell you.
No, nothing to do with that. Who gave the true definition? Here it comes. Look at it.
Good luck.
It's well-nigh incredible, but it's a mixture of chocolate and coffee. I'm sure he was telling the truth when he said Voltaire drank it. That's amazing. But here we have sherry grig. Pauline Collins, what do you say this word means?
Well, sherry grig is from the Old Middle English, shea, which means large, and grig, which means skybird. And it was a form of miracle play, which was last performed before James II, which was based on some mysterious tales about creatures who came from the sky, you know, which we're always hearing about astronauts in the times before the Great Pyramids. And the play was about this strange, mysterious person's amorous escapades. And a critic of the time, apparently, said the play is characterised by much grossness of language. And that was all that was ever said about it.
Right, Patrick, your go.
The sherry grig, it's an Ethiopian woodpecker. which gives it a very, very hard life, seeing that all the trees in Ethiopia are nearly rock hard. It's pecking away there like mad, not getting a lot of juice out of it. It's kind of bright green in colour, rather larger than the English woodpecker. And its English name, of course, it comes from the old Arabic name, which is Shirikrig.
Is it a lie like my Arabic?
Find out.
Yes, there's one more to go. We have to hear what Anthony Hopkins defines.
Sherigrig, Red Indian astrologers don't read the signs of the zodiac. They summon an audience by making traditional Red Indian noises like woo, and Red Indians then arrive in big circle, and heap big Red Indian chief has Sherigrig, work of art, in front of him with beads and shells depicting the sun, moon, stars, and from this he reads the future, such as that Patrick Campbell's team are going to win in spite of all odds.
Well, it's a sort of Red Indian almanac. It's an Ethiopian woodpecker, and it's a miracle play. Beryl Gray.
Well, Pat, I do love green and I adore birds, but somehow an Ethiopian woodpecker whose name has come from Arabia doesn't quite convince me. And I don't think that Pauline was quite right, because the miracle play, you said